basically the base note of my career has been I'm pretty comfortable doing stuff that's never been done before. I seem to be abnormally comfortable when there isn't a known solution. Once there's a known solution, I don't have the attention or management skills to implement it. But figuring out the solution, figuring out how to do something new, and get it to the point where it works and can be handed over to people who are better at running things, that's the thing that I seem to be doing. And that's sort of the only thing that ties my career together. There are a couple of notable exceptions, but basically all the interesting stuff has been stuff that hasn't been done before.
How long did it take you to kind of reach that self-awareness about like, hey, this isn't a strength of mine. I'd rather just build things and set them free?
Well, getting kicked out of a lot of companies was a good learning experience. Even ones that I sort of had voting control of, there were usually sort of employee uprisings where they would be like, look, we can't deal with all this stuff. And it's funny because I leave those companies and then typically what happens is, they plateau, that the innovation is over, but they can still grow for years and years based on what we've built. And then occasionally I get invited back to, sort of work on the new thing. But, it's a very humbling experience to be kicked out of your own company. And I see these guys, like Bill Gates or Zuck or, people who have, both sort of created the product and then grown with the company. I'm not that guy. I just sort of create the product and then leave.
That makes sense. So to get back to your Square founding experience, I know you mentioned you had the idea when you owned your glass blowing studio and you wanted to be able to run payments. How did you know that you wanted to start a business with your co-founder, Jack Dorsey, and what do you think of as kind of the essential traits in a founder?
So I always have to have a co-founder when I start something because, of course, my skills are sort of deficient in the management area. And, so it's always me plus somebody else. In the case of Jack, Jack and I started working together when he was 15 years old. And he was my summer intern. He and I worked together a couple of years. This was back in the early 90s. And it was a very good, collaboration, although then he went off to college. And then after college, he started a couple of companies and then he started Twitter. And then, Twitter became a big deal. And then they kicked Jack out. And, he's from St. Louis. I'm from St. Louis. So we, sort of reconnected. And Jack asked me if I wanted to start a new company with him. He thought, well, it was sort of fun working with Jim. I don't know what he thought. Okay. I won't speak for the man. But for whatever reason, at that point in his life, he wanted to work with me. And so I said, great, because it was always fun working with Jack. And so we decided we'd do something, but we didn't know what we were going to do. And fortunately, it was about that time that I stumbled upon this idea for Square because I lost a sale of a piece of glass.
That makes sense. And then once you got the business going, what were kind of the main challenges, the most fun parts, and maybe the most surprising parts? Anything you want to comment on?
So surprising to me was how difficult it was to do something that I thought was very simple. So our original idea for Square, which was just this, sort of easy process that a small merchant could use, was completely against the way the financial system was rigged. And I say rigged because it almost seemed like they made specific rules to prevent small business people from competing on a level playing field. And in fact, later I was able to prove that, in fact, the system was rigged and that small companies, basically paid almost 50 times as much for similar services as large companies did. So that was sort of shocking to me. The other thing that was shocking was that Jack and I could be successful doing this without any experience in the business. But probably the most surprising thing was that we beat back Amazon. And most people don't even know this because it happened and nobody even knew that Amazon had a product. But for a year and a half there, Amazon built a product that competed directly with Square. So Amazon, they've got this thing. They basically take a startup they like, and then they copy their product, and then they undercut their price, and then they watch that startup die. And that just always happens. And when Amazon did that to us, we were expected to die along with the other, pile of bodies. But it turns out it didn't happen. And we fought Amazon for about a year, and then at the end of that year, Amazon was the one that relented. And in fact, I always carry one of these things on me. Like they mailed one of these little square readers to all of their soon-to-be former customers, which I thought was really cool. I mean, Amazon as a competitor is terrifying, but they were actually pretty classy about the way they handled it. But the point is, we won, but I couldn't figure out why. Like, it didn't make any sense. Because, this is the equivalent of, having your parachute not open when you're 20,000 feet above the earth, doing a fall onto the planet and still surviving. Like, it does happen. Like, there are people who jump out of planes, the parachute doesn't work, and then they live. But in the case of Square, like, I was happy we lived, but I couldn't explain why it happened. And I don't believe in random events. I don't believe that something like Amazon relenting was just some sort of accident, or that they were being nice, or that, I couldn't explain it. So that's what led me on this quest to essentially answer that question. And that's kind of how I ended up writing a book about it.
That's awesome. And I think you are among the few who have survived Amazon's wrath. So
at the time, we were the only. I've heard of another company that Amazon is currently taking on in video that has survived, but they're using the same playbook that we did, which is essentially having an innovation stack.
Awesome. Well, to shift a little bit, I wanted to talk about kind of the topic of the day, topic of every day of the last 6 months, COVID. I'm wondering if you see the mission of Square kind of evolving and changing at all in light of COVID. I know there was an announcement today about some payroll funding that Square is rolling out. Do you have any general thoughts about either Square or the future of kind of fintech?
Well, yes. So if you look at the companies that have actually grown during this time, all of them are providing more modern, more connected financial services. So fintech itself, I'm basically taking your second question first. Fintech itself, I think, is going to do very, very well, to the extent that a lot of the systems that we use every day to connect ourselves financially are antiquated. They're really, especially if you travel, or if you're used to travel, you'll know that, we're sort of laggards in the United States compared to the rest of the world in a lot of the ways we, pay for things, in a lot of the ways we move money and track money and have financial services. So anything that modernizes that is going to be really good. Now, specifically in Square's case, because we tend to have a disproportionate number of small businesses, the small businesses were very, very hurt by what happened. And we saw the pain register, in real time with our customers and their sales. And it was terrifying. And so what we did, because fortunately we're still very, very much an engineering-led company, we started building products. And, during March and April, we were shipping a new product every day because their businesses were changing every day. So if you had a restaurant, well, all of a sudden the restaurant's closed, but now you could have takeout or you can have delivery. But, takeout and delivery, like that's not just, throw up a website. Like, you need to schedule couriers. So there's all this infrastructure that you need. And, no individual restaurant could do that. But Square had, literally over 1,000 engineers who could immediately start digging into the problems that our businesses were having in real time. So our productivity, the cadence of products that we shipped was just going through the ceiling. I've never seen Square be more productive. Ironically, by our internal measures, Square became way more productive as a company during the pandemic. And that was partially because, our customers were in trouble and we rallied, but also part of it was because it forced us to use new tools ourselves, because we closed all our offices. So now we have to figure out how to do this. We had a virtual system in place, so we knew how to do it, but it wasn't universally adopted. Well, COVID made it universally popular, so Square actually sort of had a double benefit, because of the crisis.
Yeah, and that's definitely reflected in the growth of the price on the market as well. I think COVID has forced a lot of companies to sink or swim.
Yes. It has revealed who are, I guess, as Buffett said, who's swimming naked, right?
Cool. So we only have a couple minutes left. So I'm going to go through just a couple sort of advice type questions that MBAs would be eager to hear your thoughts on. And you've started a lot of companies. You've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs in your work with the various VC funds. What would you say is the most useful piece of advice you have for someone trying to start a business?
Know if you're a business person or an entrepreneur. So the focus of my book is this line between business people who probably are getting MBAs right now, and they're going to enter industries where the solution is known. Okay, so you want to go open up a coffee shop or an accounting firm or build a hedge fund. Fine, we know how to do that stuff. You don't have to invent anything. As a matter of fact, you can go to a trade show where you can learn the best practices. You can hire consultants. That is the world where most of the money is made. But there is this other world of invention and entrepreneurship where all of the rules of business, not all of the rules, but many of the important rules of business no longer apply, or in fact they apply in reverse. And that is a very uncomfortable world where you are building something that has never been built before, therefore you don't know that it's going to work. Even if it works, you don't know if there's going to be a market for it. There's just a different level of chaos in the world of entrepreneurship. And I say entrepreneurship, when I use that word, I'm using its archaic definition. I'm using Schumpeter's original definition of entrepreneur, which was somebody who built a business that had never been done before. And that is no longer the current way the word is used, but it's very important. If you understand and can recognize what side of the line you're on, you can make decisions much better. So these days, when I see that I'm doing something that's entrepreneurial, I know to use a different set of behaviors than when I'm doing something that's business.
That makes sense. It's almost like left brain, right brain, just a different toolkit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like left brain, right fist.
Cool. So we probably only have time for one more question. Let's go with, what is something that you wish you could have told yourself at the beginning of your career?
Don't always look for an expert. Like, it's okay to be in a business that you don't understand. And that was, I guess it's sort of giving you the same answer in a different way, but I made so many mistakes copying the right behaviors from industries that were the wrong industries, right? So my friends who, my businesses were, sort of continually failing until at some point I changed the way I was doing everything and stopped doing everything like everybody else was doing. And that turned out to be sort of the breakthrough, but they didn't realize what was happening. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until, Amazon, and I actually went on a formal study of this, that I actually realized what was truly going on. Because it's almost like if you watch somebody who's a master at something, but they didn't formally study it, they don't know why they're a master. They don't. But you break it down, and I basically spent a year analyzing what happened in Square and doing what I would consider a reasonably scientific breakdown of exactly what happened. And then once I saw it, I was like, oh my God, oh yeah, of course it makes sense. As a matter of fact, the reason I wrote the book is because I'm a scientist by training, and I wanted to be a good scientist, and I know that researching history is a way of creating selection bias. So to combat my selection bias, since all the people I'd studied had died, I found one who was still alive. His name was Herb Kelleher. He was the founder of Southwest Airlines. So I flew down to see Herb, and I took him all my research, and I said, Herb, I think Southwest is a good example of a company like Square that has an innovation stack, but I don't even know if this is a valid, inference. And Herb got really excited. He basically said, yes, it's right, and he said that I should share this with the world. So basically, one of my, sort of business idols gave me a homework assignment, which is how we ended up with a book. But it was one of those insights that, I really wish I'd learned earlier, because I would have made a lot fewer mistakes.
That's really great advice. And I think on that great nugget, I will hand it over to Professor Segram to take you through some more questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Hi, Jim. Welcome to Stern. How are you? And this is a fantastic read. I'm going to sound like a spokesperson for your book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And congratulations on this book. And also, it could pass as a psychology book, a philosophy book, combination of business tactics. That is the most I enjoyed about your book. And
Thank you. You know, it started off as a comic book. Did you know that?
I did not know that, Jim.
So the true story of the book was that, Herb Keller, who had this legendary sense of humor, he basically said, you need to share this with the world. And I thought, oh, great. I can't write a business book because they're so damn boring. I just couldn't see myself putting one of those things into the world. So I wrote a graphic novel.
Okay.
So the whole book was a graphic novel. It took me a year to do. And I finally finished the first draft. And I called Herb to tell him. And I was super excited because I thought Herb would love this. And he hated it. He just hated it. And it really sort of hurt me. But it was also probably the best advice I'd ever gotten because Herb thought I was trivializing something that was really important.
Fair enough.
And he said, look, I can't stop you from writing a graphic novel, but I can't ask you to leave me out.
Okay.
And I thought about that, and I was like, well, I'm not leaving Herb Keller out of my book, so I rewrote it as a book. But if you read the thing, it actually reads more like, there's Nazis, there's a murder, there's an evil gang, there's nudity. Like, there's just a bunch of stuff you would expect in a business book because it wasn't originally supposed to be a business book. But thank you. I'm happy you liked it.
I really enjoyed it, and I saw the undercurrent of some events when I read the book. So thanks.
Actually, so if you guys want to get a free copy of the actual comic that goes with the book, you can go to jimmckkelvey.com. I did actually produce some of the work as a proper comic. So
okay.
It's free. You can just get it for free, and you don't have to recheck mine.
We'll get a copy of that. Alrighty. And the first thing I wanted to start off with is your research funding to Washington University at St. Louis regarding a couple of COVID vaccines. Could you please elaborate on that and where it is? What is the progress? And could you enlighten us on that?
So Washington University, my alma mater, has a world-class medical school and a very, very good teaching hospital tied to it. And they called me right at the beginning of the pandemic, and they said a lot of the work that they've done on the spike protein and the SARS-CoV-2 protein, on SARS and on Ebola were relevant to SARS-CoV-2. And they said, look, we've already got like 2/3 of this stuff done. We just need to get our research going. And so I was, I believe, the biggest funder of that effort. And it wasn't because I knew what I was talking about, because I don't know anything about biochemistry. But it was just this simple math, and I did it in my head. We're basically losing 1,000 American citizens a day.
Very sad.
About 5,000 people worldwide at the time.
Right.
And I thought, every day we delay is another day when, somebody loses their grandparents. So I thought, well, I got all this money, and I'm not going to spend it, so I might as well use it. Even though, look, the government is going to fund this stuff, but government money, if you've ever taken it, it can take months.
That's
right. There's a lot of paperwork. And I got these guys the money the next day, and I basically said, well, it wasn't just me, it was me and probably about 20 other people.
Right.
But we all basically whipped out our checkbooks and said, whatever you need, start the work. So the result of this is 2 very promising vaccine candidates. One candidate is extremely effective. It makes people non-infectious.
Excellent.
And it's worked in the rodents. By the way, we perfected a mouse that can get SARS-CoV-2, so that was a big deal. So we could actually test it in our own mouse model. But then we built out a series of primates tests, and that's going into human testing now. That vaccine, I think, is going to work, but what do I know? I'm not a scientist. But what I can tell you is that the physical reaction of the scientists is something that I
can see, and these guys are getting, like, in a way that scientists don't normally get. Like,
Right.
they got it. Yeah. It's possible that somebody else will come up with a vaccine that works well enough before that,
Right.
which is fine. But the point is, if that doesn't work, WashU's got your back.
Excellent.
The second thing you'll notice is if you follow, WashU's campus is open, and they have developed a rapid saliva-based test. So this is super cool. The test is so sensitive that although they haven't started doing this, they can actually basically, to be infected, you need 100 parts per some denominator, which I don't know. This thing will detect 5 parts, so it's
Really?
20 times more sensitive than necessary. And it's because it's saliva-based, you don't have to, stick that Q-tip up your nose that like makes you forget your middle name.
Right.
That all that stuff is a solved problem, and that's working. That's why the campus at WashU is open right now. They're testing all the students every 2 weeks.
Excellent, excellent. And we are very grateful for that funding. So a lot of, including Jack, has given away some money into research and helping people who are suffering from this. And we are all very grateful for this research funding from private sector, rather than leaving this problem to the government alone. And
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, we live in a society that allows people to make phenomenal amounts of money, and then the question is, well, what do you do?
Right.
And I think one of the answers is if you have the liberty to spend money without getting much of permission, like I had to ask my wife, but short of that, it was, actually, I don't even know if I asked my wife. I probably just said yes. I probably pretended yes.
Is she watching this? Is she watching this?
Anyway, she was for it.
Okay,
So,
that's good news. That's good news.
but yeah, I mean, I think, I'm in a pretty good position. I'm glad it worked. But I would have done it anyway.
Thank you so much for that, Jim. The second one I wanted to speak to you about, you touched upon this when you spoke to Ali, that you're a firm believer that the greatest innovation happens when there is a recession, there's a crisis, our backs are against the wall. Could you elaborate on that thesis?
Yeah, so, and again, I use the word innovation in a sort of archaic way, but I'm basically talking about stuff that's not been done before.
Right.
So this isn't some sort of incremental refinement of a product that we already know and understand, like all the cars that I drive now start with a push of a button.
Right.
And that's like an innovation in cars, but who cares?
Right.
Is it really that, is your Volvo that much better because it starts like this as opposed to like that? I don't know.
It's not a radical change.
Right. But if you talk about radical change, one of the things, especially if you're in the radical change business, one of the problems that you will very quickly notice is that people don't accept or even understand or recognize when a product is new. Like if you bring out a new product and you show people that new product, they will completely ignore its existence.
Right.
And so, if you think about this, the question becomes, well, how do you get somebody to notice something that's truly new? And one of the ways to do that is to wait for a period of chaos. Because the way the mind works, if everything's working well, the best strategy you can have is do what you did yesterday. If everything's great, what you should do, what you did yesterday. Like just keep doing this stuff. Maybe get a little bit better, but just keep going. Don't mess with it, right? So, but what if there's chaos? If things are disruptive, if things are really sort of unsettling, then people become all of a sudden receptive to new ideas. It's like, okay, I need to start bringing in new ideas because what I'm doing is not working.
Right.
And so if you take something as horrible as a pandemic, or Jack and I started our last company in a recession.
Right.
The biggest bank in the world was started like in San Francisco the year before the Great San Francisco earthquake. So you see these parallels throughout history where chaos tends to be this thing that sparks innovation. And there are a bunch of reasons, but I think one of them is that people just become way more receptive to those ideas at those moments.
So I do a fair bit of work in this area, Jim. So we are inherently risk averse, and when there's a crisis, we are willing to take on risk. There's an incentive to take on risk, and
being risk averse is not something you should be ashamed of.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I'm highly risk averse.
Really? Hard to believe, Jim.
Oh no! So I do things that are risky, like I fly planes.
Right.
Okay, and something where if I screw up, I can kill myself, or kill myself and everybody who's aboard. But I take great strides to minimize that risk.
Okay.
Like I'm always trying to do things, and I'm always training, and I'm always, the plane has to be serviced, and then I'm very careful about weather. I'm very careful. Just like you do something that is inherently risky, and then your risk aversion makes you sort of take it down to a decimal point or two that is acceptable.
So you have some sort of a risk mitigation strategy in place where, although this is a risky venture, but you take the necessary precautions, right, to minimize the risk.
Yes, but I mean, I have friends who do extreme sports, and I think they're nuts.
Right.
I mean, watch Free Solo. Watch the movie Free. Just, God, I almost wet myself watching that thing. Terrifying,
Yes.
And I do rock climbing, but I never climbed without a rope.
Right. Right.
I've never climbed without a rope and a partner who weighs more than me.
Okay. I hear you. I hear you. So I was looking at the history of this. I'm really fascinated by this. So I looked at when GE was founded. GE was founded in 1876. And we had a recession from 1873 to 79. One of the most well-known brand names in the world was founded during recession. And like your company, Uber was founded during the recession period. Airbnb. So it really gels with me. And I talk about this in my MBA classes, how cost of labor becomes cheap to start a company.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yeah, when we started Square, New York City offered us free rent.
There we go.
You can have free office space in Manhattan if you will locate the company here.
What are the chances of that free rent in Manhattan?
Well, these days...
These days, this is a different...
Looking back up, right? It's resources are cheaper, but I think it's more the mentality.
Right.
It's just, people vastly underestimate how difficult it is to get somebody's attention.
Absolutely.
And, I tell the story in the book about why the Square reader is so darn narrow. Like this stupid thing. Like, look, I'm a good engineer. I got a degree from a very good school. Like, I know that the credit card rocks as it goes through this reader.
It wobbles a little bit.
It wobbles. It ruins the read. And I could have fixed it by making it wider, but to do that would have wasted one of the precious moments where your credit card gets read by this impossibly small device and you actually wake up and pay attention.
Right.
Just a couple of seconds. I just need a couple of seconds of you actually paying attention. I'm looking at, you got, hundreds of people watching this lecture right now. I know most of them aren't paying attention.
Right.
And I know even the ones that think they are probably only paying attention for 2 or 3 minutes, but like maybe between you and me and Allie and the others, like we can get 1 or 2 messages through the channel.
Right.
In those couple of minutes when people are actually paying attention. The attention is incredibly precious.
It is a rare commodity, absolutely a rare commodity. I want to finish up on asking you about, you are an independent director at the St. Louis Fed. And,
yes.
And I do a fair bit of research. I am on advisory board of a few companies thinking about the digital central bank digital currency. What are your thoughts on that? Could Square play a role in creating this central bank digital currency? Because transfer of payments from non-bank or underbanked individuals is very difficult through the banking system.
Yeah, so if you look at the unbanked and underbanked individuals and you want any evidence of what the demand is. I actually have a proof case here. You'll love this.
Could you send it to me when you get a chance?
No. I'm actually going to show it to you in real time because I'm an Android user, which means I'm a man of the people, right? I carry
absolutely
loans for the rich people. But I'm going to turn on the top chart, and these are the top apps in the world right now.
Really?
Okay.
Wow.
Number 1 is Zoom.
I see that.
Number 2 in the world is TikTok. Number 3 in the world is Cash App.
Square's Cash App.
So, Cash App, yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, we're ahead of, Instagram's 3 down, WhatsApp, Venmo's not even in the top 20.
Right.
Why is that? Why is Cash App ahead of Disney Plus? Why is Cash App ahead of Instagram? Why is Cash App so popular? And the answer is Cash App provides meaningful financial connections for the un- and underbanked.
Right.
It's also awesome if you happen to be, well-to-do, but if you are sort of on the edge, that's where this product just shines. It's like having your own bank that's not predatory, that's not doing things that, are, more like a payday lender than a financial institution. And so, you look at the demand, and I remember your original question was crypto, and I'm not trying to dodge it, but I'm trying
not
to say,
crypto specific.
Not unbanked. Like, I say that we have solutions today that don't depend on cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, look, we had a long conversation about this. I'll tell you one thing that I think is an interesting question for me. And I do not have an answer for this, but as somebody who's effectively a bank regulator right now, I know that governments do not like losing control of their currency.
Absolutely.
So the question is, if crypto in its current form removes the government from control of the currency, what will governments likely do? Well, we've already seen examples in China of what they're going to do.
Right.
The question is, what is going to happen? What sort of rules are governments going to put in place to reassert their authority over your money? And my guess is that whatever those rules are, they will be like other rules that the government creates. Maybe like the tax code. Maybe like, I don't know, go apply for a driver's license sometime and see how governments implement rules. And then ask yourself how much fun that's going to be.
That's exactly right.
So I think there's a real interest in, I'm really a strong proponent of a government-run crypto system.
Glad to hear that.
Whether or not the Fed will do it. But I think the world sort of using math to create these, scarce resources like Bitcoin, I think the last chapter will be written when the government actually figures out how they want to play. And if it gets significant enough, they're going to want to play, and that's going to be interesting.
Thank you so much, Jim, for your time. A lot of people are waiting to ask you questions. Thank you for coming to Stern. I'll pass it on to Rob to start the Q&A. Catch up with you later, Jim.
Thank you very much, Professor Segram. Jim, great to have you. You've really shown that it's good to be square. I couldn't resist. I guess the first question, you talked about kind of reconciling entrepreneurship with being a business person. But I guess as part of that, and being a creator, how do you reconcile where creativity is in the process? Kind of when do you seek control and when do you say this is a sticking point?
So I think of creativity as basically a last resort. I believe that if you're trying to be creative for the sake of being creative, you're likely to create the segue. I love the segue. The segue is this cool thing, but we've never needed it. It's this thing. Dean Kamen built it, and I got to ride it, and it was cool. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. I wish I needed one of these things. But I didn't. I could think of no use. And these days all the malls are closing, so we don't even need mall cops anymore. That was the one use case for the Segway that I could think of, the mall cop going around. Anyway, to me, innovation is something that is a last resort. In other words, you've got a problem, you look for the solution. And probably your problem is not unique. And probably somewhere on YouTube or somewhere in a book or somewhere out on the internet or somewhere in the brain of some person who's smarter than you and probably older than you, there is the solution. And you just need to find it. And that's your job. Search. But you might have found a problem that is still a solvable problem but has not been solved by humanity yet. And in the case of Square, we solved a problem of how do you get small merchants paid. Didn't seem like a big deal, but it turned out to be a really big deal. So what I do is I try to recognize the difference between when I'm living in a world where I can copy a solution or in a world where I have to invent. And if I'm in a world where I have to invent, then I have to be willing to be extremely uncomfortable. I have to be willing to be scared. I have to be willing to be it's just really unpleasant. It's just fundamentally difficult for humans to do something that other humans are not doing. And if you're doing something truly innovative, you're going to be out of the pack for a while, and it's going to feel weird. And your parents and your friends and the people who loved you are going to tell you to come back into the herd, right? Oh, don't do that. That'll never work. You're going to hear all this terrible stuff. And you have to decide if it's worth it, because a lot of times people quit not because they couldn't solve the problem, but because they weren't prepared for how lonely it is when you're doing something that the rest of society doesn't understand yet.
And I think that's a nice segue for our next question. I mean, in terms of those who are able to create and kind of innovate, and I know that you kind of pulled out, I also have an Android, kind of one of the most popular apps. In terms of those companies that you believe in tech are taking these challenges head on and creating better solutions for the future, which companies do you think are best positioned for success in the long term?
Well, I look at companies with innovation stacks. If you're looking for companies that are going to sort of massively dominate your markets, there are basically three things you can look for. One, you can look for viral growth. So you can look for any sort of system that its uses creates more usage. And strongly associated with that is network effect, i.e. the value of the product increases as the network increases. And the other thing you can look for is marketplaces, where there's lock-in on both sides. It's like, well, nobody likes Craigslist, but we all use Craigslist because everybody else uses Craigslist, stuff like that. Those three things are so powerful that they form investment theses that are really practical. The other investment thesis you can go with, and this is the reason when I did the research for my book, I found a bunch of tech companies that had innovation stacks, and I didn't use any of them because those three things that I just told you, those are such powerful phenomena that, even if you don't have an innovation stack, even if you're not that clever, and I would argue that a lot of the companies with network effect don't have to be that clever, or in the case of Microsoft, you get network effect and or a marketplace effect, and you can have crappy products for a decade and still grow. But there's another, there's a fourth force, and that is innovation stacks, which through a bunch of math that I go through in the book is a really tremendously defensible position. So I like that. Now, as far as tech companies that I like, what I particularly like are tech companies that are actually doing things that are new. And God, there are not a ton of them. Most tech companies are like, we're the Uber for fill in the blank. We're the Square of this. We're Facebook except here. So whenever I hear that, I get bored.
Yeah, so I think going off that, and you mentioned this in the book, you really talk about how younger people should be audacious and really take risks.
No, I don't say younger people.
Yeah. But you kind of say how people in general should be audacious and kind of take risks. But we're seeing a decline in entrepreneurship right now in America. So How do we
How
really
do you measure that? How do you measure the decline? I don't know. What's the metric for measuring entrepreneurship?
I guess it's my understanding about like new businesses that are formed, like I guess this year versus last year.
Okay, but we're using different definitions because you're using entrepreneurship in its current definition, which is like business starting. Okay, and to me, that's, well, I guess it's uninteresting because it's like, I don't care how many copycat businesses open. Like, if you have 15 new accounting firms versus 12 new accounting firms, do I care? And the answer is no. Like, I want people starting businesses. It's good for the economy. But at least in my world, that's not entrepreneurship. That's just businessship, you know. The actual creativity, the stuff that the people trying to solve problems that haven't been solved before, that's the only thing I care about measuring.
Mm-hmm. I think kind of shifting gears a little bit towards Square and kind of thinking about, you originally created it as to help deal with kind of the issues of cash. As we're seeing in the pandemic now, a lot of businesses are operating under that no cash model. And as part of that, a lot of these businesses have undocumented individuals who don't have bank accounts to participate in the economy. How do you think that mobile platforms like Square can help these individuals who really don't have access to kind of mediums to utilize your technology?
Well, I mean, Cash App's the great example. First of all, a lot of these people, you can argue immigration all day long, but these are good, hardworking people, and they deserve to be paid. And just because somebody got their money through some way you didn't approve of doesn't mean that they should lose that money to loan sharks and being robbed because they got paid on Friday in a bunch of, with a bunch of 20s, or have to, face usury rates at a payday lender. So, I really think that things like the Cash App are doing great things for the world, politics aside. Now, if you want to argue the politics of immigration, I'll just say that the government has a lot of power to fix the problem that they've chosen never to use. If you wanted to fix the problem of immigration properly, we could have a single government-issued ID at the federal level as opposed to state. Your social security number is not unique. It's, as a matter of fact, the first thing you do if you're trying to, fake an ID and, work in the U.S. is you get a fake social security card. We can fix that problem. We choose not to. But as far as payments, I believe everyone should be included, and I don't care what they look like or where they came from.
So then, I guess jumping off of that for the inclusivity of payments, how do you look at how payments are being adopted on an international scale? And if you think that there are any specific sectors that are really at the forefront of adopting technologies such as Square and others?
So the best payments in the world, as far as an ecosystem, is in China right now. And the reason for that is you have two companies that both own, high 40% of the market that are competing. And then you've got this government on top of them that is very, very strong and can, enforce order. And because the government can enforce order, the companies don't get too out of line. But you've got this perfect storm of innovation where, Alibaba and Tencent are, constantly, jockeying for the next great thing. And they're bringing payments, and particularly small dollars, small yuan payments, to, billions of people. And it's fantastically innovative. So if I, these days, if I want to be sort of inspired and in some ways depressed, I will look at what China is doing vis-a-vis the United States and Western Europe, because they're really a hotbed of innovation right now, at least in that area.
I guess kind of shifting around a lot, you basically said that whenever you're looking to start something, you normally work with somebody. And I think buy-in is such a huge thing in really any aspect of life. How do you really find the right people and ultimately convince them to go along with you on the journey?
It's really simple. I pick the problem that I want to work with. I mean, in the case of Square, it was weird because Jack and I had already worked together, and he asked me to start a new company with him, and I enjoyed working with Jack, so that was the reason I agreed. But in general, what I will do is choose a problem. and then I'll point to the problem, and usually the problem is something that is not a guaranteed solution, i.e. there's no known solution. So that immediately eliminates probably 80% of the job candidates right there. Like, just 4 out of 5 people will just drop out if they don't know what the business is going to be. So now you're left with people who are willing to sort of work for a business that is pretty risky, and so that's a pretty cool group of people. And then from that, you just look for personalities that gel. And as far as talking them into joining, I do the opposite. I give them every possible reason I could think for them not to join. So the current CEO of my company, Invisibly, or actually any of the guys who run any of my companies, I got about 6 or 7 of them, and they're all run by people who have been able to endure the speech, where I basically give them every single reason I could give for them not to participate. Oh, by the way, we did the same thing at Square when we were courting investors. We put together a pitch deck where we put 140 reasons why they should not invest their money.
Basically, you are the master of reverse psychology.
Well, it's not reverse psychology. What it is, it's like, look, if there's a deal breaker in here, you might be able to fake it during a job interview, but it's going to come out on the job. Like, if you're not really into this, it's going to be evident. Now, you can fake it for a month or a week or something like that, but like at some point, you're going to be in pain. We're going to hate it, and it's going to blow up, and it's going to hurt both of us. So let's be really honest at the beginning about why this might not work.
I think kind of going off that and then kind of thinking about people, I think one unique question that was asked, unfortunately, not understandable, is that you've gotten the chance to see Jack Dorsey over many facets of his life. Kind of in terms of that evolution, and what do you think has made him a great partner for you?
Well, Jack's always been brilliant. When he was 15, my nickname for him was Jack the Genius. Turns out that was a little more prophetic than I thought. But, he's a quiet, thoughtful guy. He's very hardworking. He's very focused. And he genuinely cares about people. That said, he lives in a weird world. He doesn't have... he doesn't have a very normal life. He runs 2 public companies. He's constantly in the spotlight, and he takes a lot of grief for that. And he gets hauled in front of Congress. So, sometimes I feel sorry for him, but, ultimately, he's a guy who I think genuinely wants to do good in the world. And, despite the fact that some of his technologies have been used for purposes that I don't think are very productive, he sticks with it, and I respect him for that.
Well, I think the last question, which is from Vivic Iyer, is, when you think about the future of Square, what is something that you hope in terms of that will be actualized by the company in the future?
So I'm super proud of what Cash App is doing. I'm super proud of what, product that I helped develop, which is the basic Square Payments product. I'm looking for the third thing. I'm looking for the new thing that we're going to do that will surprise me, and probably something that I will initially not understand. And I can't wait to see what that next innovation stack is going to be in my own company.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for answering all the questions. Thank you much for your time. I was like you. I had my hands like this for free solo, and now I just relive that, and I will ask your Professor Segram.
Thank you, Jim, for being here. If the Square did not work out, you would have been a great stand-up comedian. That's my observation. So you're a funny man. And thank you, Rob. Thank you, Ali. Thank you to Jim. I'll catch up with you later, Jim. Take care. Bye for now.
What a pleasure. Thanks. Bye-bye.